In the last few videos, we've seen how pivot tables will allow us to create powerful analytics. But often we need to quickly absorb that information and make those split-second determinations. And for that, we need a pivot chart or another visualization. When we think pivot tables and visualizations, typically we do think pivot charts, but we do have some other options which you would like to look at first. And one of them is conditional formatting. Now we're in the investment tab, and Rohan would like to add a conditional format that demonstrates the proportion of investment in a particular country compared to the others. We could add it directly to the data here, but we actually want it added in a separate column. So we're going to grab our amount in US dollar millions and just pop it into the values column again. So we've actually got it twice. Before we add our conditional format, it's a good idea to remove any row filters. Otherwise, you will only end up adding it to the visible cells. So coming to our row labels, I'm going to come to clear filter from recipient country to remove the filter. And two more little tweaks. We're going to come to our design tab. I'm going to turn our row and column totals off. And on our data tab, we're going to sort largest to smallest. We're now set up and we're going to add our visualization. So as we would with normal data, we're going to click into C4 and press Ctrl-Shift down arrow. And then coming to the Home tab, we're going to come to the conditional formatting button. And you can add any of these conditional formats. But the one we want to use today is a data bar. So choose the color you like, and there you go. Let's make a small modification to it. So I'm going to come back to conditional formatting. We're going to come to Manage Rows, and we're going to double click our rule, and we get the full set of customizations available as well. I'm going to change the color so it ties in with my theme, and I'm going to choose Show Bar Only, and then I'm going to say OK and OK. Very simple way of adding a visualization. Let's change the heading. So this is going to be investment in millions. Interestingly, you can also add custom number formats to a visualization, which can be handy when the conditional formatting doesn't give you what you need. So let's go and add our amount in millions. Again to our values quadrant, and we're going to call this one Target Met. And what we would like to be able to see here is whether they've achieved their annual target. So 900 million is the target. And if we hit it, we want to see a green smiley face. And if we don't, we actually want to leave the cell empty. So I'm going to select the data. And we're going to come up to our number format group and click the dialog launcher. Or you may remember the keyboard shortcut, Ctrl+1. And I want to custom format, and to make life a little easier, we've already added it. So we're going for color 14, values that are greater than 900, and where that's true, we want to see a smiley face. I'm going to say OK, and there's our custom number format. If we then were to filter the data to show the values for 2011, both immediately recalculate. So there's a couple of creative ideas. Let's now see how we create a pivot chart. And for this, we're going to come to the next tab, which is capacity by year. Click somewhere into the pivot data. And to create a pivot chart, we come to our pivot table analyze tab. And in the tools group, we're going to select pivot chart. It looks like we're getting all the same options as we do with regular charts. And while pivot charts are very similar to regular charts, there are two distinct differences. The first is that we can't use all the same chart types. We can use the normal ones, so everything from column down to area. But if I try to use an XY scatter, you'll see that's grayed out. And it's the same case for everything else underneath as well. The other difference is that when we create a normal chart, we select some cells and we chart the data of those cells. A pivot chart is a graphical representation of a pivot table. You can't select part of a pivot table. If the pivot table changes, the chart will change and vice versa. Outside of that, you will find that pivot charts are very much like regular charts. The one we want is a stacked column. So we're going to come to column and choose stacked column. And then we're going to say OK. And here is our pivot chart. It looks very similar to a regular chart, but probably the first thing you'll notice is that you get these field buttons. And these allow us to interact with the pivot chart, just like you would with a pivot table. On the right-hand side, our pivot table fields have been replaced with pivot chart fields. But you'll see instead of column, we have legend, and instead of row, we have axes. Let's start by getting familiar with the field buttons. And the first one I'd like to show you are these two at the bottom right-hand corner, which have been added with the newer version of Excel. So you might not have these if you've got a slightly older version. Wherever you have multiple values in your axis, you actually get a hierarchy, and these allow you to expand or collapse that hierarchy. So if I click on the plus, you'll see it's expanded to show me all the renewable and non-renewable, and you'll notice that the pivot table has changed as well. If I click the minus, it collapses the groups. I'm going to expand them again, but I don't actually want to see the non-renewable. And for each of the fields represented in the pivot chart quadrants, you'll also get a field button. If I come to RE or non-RE, I can actually choose to not show the non-renewable. And when I say OK, it is now showing me the renewable capacity both in my chart and in my table. It's still got the hierarchy though, which I don't want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to my pivot chart field list. I'm going to grab the RE or non-RE and drop it into the filters quadrant. What that has done is add a filter to the top of my chart. I no longer have that hierarchy. I can also filter by either my axis categories or my legend series. So coming to my year, for example, I could choose to just see the data for 2001. And that chart is looking a lot more sensible. To clear the filter, I click the drop down and click Clear Filter from Year. This chart, however, is not actually showing me what I want to see. I would like to see my year on my axis and my technology as a series. So what I really want to do is swap these two values around. And I could do it by just dragging like I would in a pivot table. But pivot charts give us another option. I'm going to come up to my Design tab. And in the Data group, I can switch my row, column, data. And when I do, you'll see it's switched in my table and my chart now looks much better. On the Design tab, we have all the same tools as with regular charts. So for example, I could go in and style my chart. I could change my chart type. I could change colors. I could add or remove chart elements. I also have the chart element button here, and I can come and move my legend. So I'm going to put that at the top. I'm going to switch off my grid lines. I could add a chart title if I wanted to, and I have the other options for formatting my chart as well. So for example, if I come to my vertical axis and double click, that will open up my Format Axis panel. And I'd like to show this in thousands. I'd also like to change my gap width. So I'm going to click on one of my bars and I'm going to make that 50%. And my dates are looking very squashed. So I'm going to make a bit of a change to that as well. So clicking onto the horizontal axis, we're going to come to Axis Options, Size and Properties, and we're going to change our text direction to be rotated. And then I'm going to close up that panel because that's looking pretty good. I just have one concern though, and that's these field buttons. While they do allow me to interact with the chart, they take up quite a lot of chart space. And if I decide to print this chart, they're actually going to print. The good news is we can turn them off, and we do that by coming to our Pivot Chart Analyze tab. And on the far right, you'll see field buttons. If you click the drop down, you can actually select which ones you want to turn off. Alternatively, if you click the top part of the button, you can turn them all off with one click. And there's our completed pivot chart. Everyone say, wow. We've only had the time to create one, but we'll give you more opportunities to create them in this week's practice challenge. So don't forget to check the practice challenge out.